Okay, recently a friend was talking to me about prophecy and the way it impacts the church and the believers of Jesus Christ. And we took ourselves to the book of First Corinthians chapter 13 and from verse 9 to 12. Apostle Paul was saying something like, we know in parts and we prophesy in parts. Okay? We know in parts and we prophesy in parts. So prophecy is like the announcement of a revelation that you received from God, which is the will of God. So you're announcing to bring it to force. Okay? But the truth is this: when God reveals a thing to a person, he reveals it in full, not in parts, because God does not know in parts, remember. So when God reveals everything in full according to his level of knowledge, you receive that revelation. But when you want to interpret that revelation, it comes out of you according to the level of your knowledge as at that time. Okay? So let's say, for instance, I heard something like, a man saw a vision of the airplane. He said, I saw an eagle. I might not be accurate, but he said, I saw an eagle carrying human beings and flying. So at the time he saw the vision, God was revealing to him that we will have something like the aeroplane. But because there was no reference in his mind of an aeroplane, all he could interpret that vision to me was eagle, because that was the only thing that flies and soars. Right? And when he said that, he interpreted according to the level of his exposure and knowledge. If you run with that, you will be expecting the day eagles will become monsters and then carry human beings and be flying. But when technology came, we saw the aeroplane and that prophecy was fulfilled. Correct? That's the same way you read the book of Revelation and you see John writing, I saw a being, he has 4 heads. One head was the head of an eagle, head of a man, head of a calf, and head of a lion. So John was interpreting what he saw according to what he could make reference to, level of knowledge. This is why we say we progress in knowledge. The revelation of God does not actually progress. What progresses is the knowledge of man, so that we can understand better the revelation of God. So when Jesus was speaking, he would say things like, destroy this temple and I will rebuild in three days. He was prophesying his death and resurrection. Most of the Pharisees thought he was talking about their physical synagogue. Oh, you want to destroy the synagogue? They got angry. They didn't know. You get what I mean? The things like rapture, the trumpet will sound, these are prophecies. They might not be literal. They might not have literal interpretation. But because of the knowledge of trumpet, we know what trumpet is in this world. We know what it means to fly. So we interpret that prophecy according to what we know. What if it's deeper than that? I'm just saying though. You get what I mean? So you see, prophecy is the will of God revealed to you in full. The full knowledge of God. But because of the level of knowledge a man possesses at this time, he will interpret differently. This is why God can be saying one thing and 10 persons will interpret differently. That's why we have different churches today, different religion, different kinds of beliefs, different sects. Most of these belief systems, most of this religion, most of these churches, they had encounter with God. They had revelation from God, but they interpreted according to their levels of knowledge, according to how their minds were working as at that time, and they built a whole system of it. And some of us are running sheepishly with those things, thinking this is the entire will of God. You get what I mean? That's why when we now start growing in Christ consciousness, we begin to interpret things according to the knowledge of Christ. That's why you start finding fault in certain religions, certain belief systems. Be like, oh, this cannot be accurate. You know why? Because you're now growing in knowledge. Okay, so prophecy is awesome. It is pristine. It's one of the ways God speaks to his people. But we must be mindful of interpretation. Okay, God speaks, but man says what he hears. But man says according to what he understands. That's why if you're listening to a preacher, listening to a teacher, have your own mind working for you. Also engage the Spirit of God at work in you. Understand what God is saying to you. A preacher could be preaching and then God could be saying through that preacher different things to different people. That's why we have the Spirit of God. Okay? So that you don't run with what does not belong to you or pertain to you, or what is even not accurate. So it does not really make the preacher a false preacher. It doesn't make him a false prophet. It's just that this is his level of understanding. That's why you see most of these pastors or preachers, when they begin to mature, they begin to debunk some of the things they said 15 years ago because they've understood better. Same revelation, different understanding. Same revelation, better understanding. Okay, so I'm calling all believers. It's okay to believe in prophecy, to hold it in high esteem, but it's more important to understand Christ and allow your heart to expand so that you can interpret better what God is saying in the light of the knowledge of Christ, in the light of what it means that Jesus died and resurrected. Everything must come from that understanding that he actually died for me. The moment you understand that, it becomes easier to interpret what God is saying.